If you had told me that my own daughter would one day look me in the eye and say she was ashamed to carry my last name, I would have laughed and called you cruel. But that was before Sienna stood in front of me in her silky white robe, wedding makeup half done, and calmly dismantled 22 years of my life in a few short sentences. I legally changed my last name 6 months ago, she said, arms folded across her chest. I don't carry your name anymore, Mom. My legal name is now Sienna Page Cross. I took Samantha's last name because... She paused, tilted her head slightly, and gave me a look I will never forget. Cold, assessing, like she was talking to a stranger who'd inconvenienced her day. And because I was ashamed of carrying yours. The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, feel the blood drain from my face. My fingers went numb where they were gripping my old leather handbag, the one I'd carried through every late shift and every parent-teacher meeting. Ashamed, I repeated, but my voice came out hoarse, like it belonged to someone else. Ashamed of me, Sienna? She didn't flinch. Ashamed of what your name represents. When people ask about my family, about my background, about my connections, I don't want them picturing a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs and a mom who teaches accounting on weekends to pay the bills. I want them to see Samantha Cross, the successful businesswoman, not Lucia Anderson, the small-time loan officer who never made it out of mediocrity. Each word landed like a slap. My throat burned. For a moment, I thought I might actually be sick right there on the polished marble floor of her stepmother's mansion. You're ashamed, I whispered, more to myself than to her. Images flashed in my mind. Sienna's tiny fingers wrapped around mine at the pediatrician's office, her messy pigtails on the first day of school, her tear-streaked face after her first heartbreak. Every fever I'd sat through, every shift I'd worked, every dream I'd quietly let go of so she could have hers. And now ashamed. She wasn't finished. Children never understand when to stop twisting the knife. I don't want people to know I come from that, she added, gesturing vaguely toward the world I had built for her. I want them to know I belong to Samantha's world. Her name opens doors. Yours doesn't. For a long second, I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, heavy, like my lungs had forgotten how to work. Somewhere in the background, I heard Samantha's heels clicking on the tile and the faint sound of staff setting tables for the rehearsal dinner. Life went on. Everything moved. Except me. You might think that was the moment my heart broke, that those words, I was ashamed of carrying yours, were the worst thing my daughter had ever done to me. You'd be wrong, because what Sienna didn't know, what she couldn't have known when she signed those papers and traded Anderson for Cross, was that she wasn't just giving up a last name that day. She was giving up nearly $400,000, a beach house by the ocean, and every single safety net her grandparents and I had quietly built for the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest. But to understand how we got there, how a child can look at the parent who raised her alone and decide that money and status matter more than blood, you need to go back with me. Back 22 years. Back to the morning her father walked out. Back to when I first became both father and mother to a baby girl who would one day tell the world she was too good to carry my name. People like to say things like, a mother's love is unconditional. They don't talk much about how expensive it is, how lonely, how some nights it feels like you're trying to plug 1,000 leaks in a sinking ship with your bare hands and a roll of duct tape. For 22 years, I was both father and mother to my daughter Sienna, not as a metaphor, literally. Her father, Paul, decided that the life of a husband and father wasn't for him. Sienna was barely a year old when he walked out of our small kitchen with a suitcase in one hand, his phone in the other, and the promise that he would stay in touch. 2 weeks later, I found out why he'd really left. Her name was Samantha Cross, owner of a popular steakhouse chain, a woman with perfect hair, a perfect smile, and a portfolio full of restaurants that printed money. She could offer Paul the life he thought he deserved. Big house, international trips, fine wine, tailored suits. Everything I, a 28-year-old loan officer at a local bank, could not provide. He left me with a mortgage, a baby who still woke up twice a night, and a note on the kitchen table that simply said, "You're stronger than you think. You'll be fine." I wasn't fine, not at first. I knew nothing about taking care of a baby on my own. I didn't know how to make homemade baby food, or how to change diapers half asleep at 3 a.m., or what to do when she spiked a fever and the pediatrician's after-hours line rang and rang without answer. My older brother Marcus was the one who found me crying on the couch one afternoon surrounded by unfolded laundry and unopened bills. "Come on," he said, tugging my hand. "Get your shoes. We're going to Target." We walked the aisles while he pushed the cart and his 6-month-old son, Miles, sucked on his pacifier in the carrier strapped to his chest. Marcus grabbed diapers, wipes, formula, baby Tylenol, tiny spoons, burp cloths, things I didn't even know I needed. "Lucia," he said quietly, using the voice he only used when he was really serious, "this is going to be tough. That man left because he didn't want responsibilities. Don't expect him to come back." He was right. Paul didn't come back. Every 3 or 4 months, though, Samantha's name would pop up on my caller ID. She'd put Paul on speaker, coo a little into the phone, and then they'd let Sienna babble for 5 minutes before promising to visit soon. Birthdays and Christmases, boxes would arrive at my doorstep. Branded clothes, the newest American Girl doll, a shiny pink bicycle with a bow bigger than Sienna's head. As she got older, it became tablets, gaming consoles, and designer handbags. All the glitter, none of the work. Meanwhile, I was juggling 3 different hustles just to keep the lights on. I worked full-time at the bank, picked up extra shifts whenever someone wanted to trade, taught basic accounting at the community college on weekends, and sold life insurance commissions in the evenings. Every cent was carefully planned: tuition, clothes, school projects, the occasional treat, so she wouldn't feel left out when her private school friends had birthday parties at trampoline parks and country clubs. I sold my sporty little hatchback, the only fun thing I'd ever bought for myself, and replaced it with a used pickup truck that rattled over potholes but never missed a payment. I moved us from a cramped 2-bedroom apartment into a modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs so Sienna could have her own room and a small yard to play in. I stopped going out. No more drinks with coworkers, no more weekend getaways, no spontaneous anything. My life became a loop: work, groceries, bills, bedtime stories. And yet, every morning when Sienna's tiny arms wrapped around my waist before school, every afternoon when I saw her little face pressed to the living room window, waiting for my truck to pull into the driveway, every night when she tugged on my sleeve and said, "One more story, Mommy," I knew, deep in my bones, that I would do it all again. Not everyone saw it that way. "Lucia," my next-door neighbor, Mr. Robert, would say, leaning on the fence as I carried in groceries, "that little girl of yours is never satisfied. You work yourself to the bone, and she still finds something to pout about." At the deli on the corner, Mary would wrap Sienna's favorite candy in a small paper bag and watch as my daughter snatched it without a word. "She never says thank you," Mary muttered one day after we left. "Her head's always somewhere else." I always defended her. "It's just a phase," I'd say, more to myself than to them. "All teenagers are like this." Miles, in contrast, was the kind of kid who made you believe you hadn't completely failed at humanity. "Can I help you with dinner, Aunt Lucia?" he'd ask when Marcus dropped him off on Saturdays. "Do you want me to carry the bags? I can mow the lawn if you're tired." When Sienna and Miles were little, they played together for hours. But as they grew, the differences sharpened. Sienna wanted every new thing she saw. Her classmates had bigger houses, newer phones, fancier vacations, and somehow, all of that became my fault. "Our house is so small," she would sigh. "Why is our truck so old? Why can't we go to Mexico for spring break like everyone else?" She didn't care that I was working myself into exhaustion, so she could attend that private school in the first place. She only saw what we didn't have. Still, I pushed. She was smart, sharp, naturally good with numbers. She studied business administration at a good university, and I paid for every semester, every textbook, every late-night Uber when she stayed at the library. I took on more debt, more hours, more stress. During those university years, Samantha and Paul started showing up more often. Lunch at expensive restaurants, weekend spa trips, designer heels, just because. Samantha would take photos of their plates and their outfits and post them with captions like, "So proud of our girl, future CEO in the making." I watched from the sidelines as my daughter slowly began to associate love with marble countertops, infinity pools, and imported wine. When Sienna turned 23 and graduated, she came home one afternoon, dropped her handbag on the coffee table, and delivered the news without even sitting down. "Mom, I'm going to move in with Dad and Samantha," she said. "They have a pool. I'll have my own room with a private bathroom. And I can invite my friends over without being embarrassed by where I live." That last sentence cut deeper than any insult Paul had ever thrown at me. Embarrassed. By my house. By my life. By everything I had sacrificed so she could stand there in that perfectly pressed blazer and judge me. It's not about that, Mom, she added when she saw my face. It's about my future. Samantha's going to get me a job at her corporate office. I can build a career there. She packed her things in 2 hours. When she closed the door behind her, the house felt as empty as it had the day Paul walked out. Only this time, the silence hurt more. Because back then, I lost a husband. Now I was starting to realize I might be losing my daughter too. For a while, I told myself it was normal. Children grow up. They drift. They find new worlds, new priorities, new circles. But with Sienna, it wasn't drifting. It was a slow, deliberate recalibration of who she believed deserved a place in her life and who didn't. At first, the signs were small, insignificant, if you squinted hard enough. Moments that should have raised alarms, but instead I dismissed them as phases. Like when she stopped answering my calls right away, or when she'd forget to tell me about important events, job interviews, company dinners, even holidays she spent with Paul's new family. But the real shift? It came from her tone. There is a particular tone daughters use when they start seeing their mothers as less. Less sophisticated, less successful, less worthy. Sienna started talking to me like I was a houseplant she suddenly realized she'd forgotten to water, something mildly inconvenient and somewhat embarrassing to keep around. Mom, you don't need to worry about this. Mom, you wouldn't understand. Mom, it's a corporate environment, okay? It's different. Different. Always different. Her world began growing into something I could see, but no longer touch. I watched it happen one lunch at a restaurant Samantha had recommended. Sienna insisted we meet there, even though I quietly suggested the cozy cafe near my office. But no, the cafe wasn't Instagrammable. When I arrived, Sienna was already seated, scrolling on her phone with a glass of sparkling water in front of her. She looked up briefly and said, "Mom, you're late." I wasn't. I was 5 minutes early. But the comment wasn't about time. It was about hierarchy. The waiter approached. "Are you ready to order?" Sienna didn't even look at me before saying, "She'll have the grilled chicken salad, dressing on the side." I blinked. "I can order for myself, sweetheart." She sighed. Actually sighed. The kind of sigh that carries 3 unspoken sentences. "You're embarrassing me. This place isn't for people like you. Let me control the situation before you ruin it." "Mom, please," she whispered sharply. By the time the food arrived, she'd shifted the conversation towards Samantha's connections, Paul's business trips, the high-end clients she was meeting through her new job. At one point, she said, "Networking is everything. You wouldn't get it. You've always worked small jobs. Stable, but small." I swallowed hard. She didn't notice. Then came the visits, rare and short. She'd drop by with the brisk cheerfulness of someone performing a chore. "Hi, Mom, I only have 10 minutes. Can I borrow your slow cooker? Samantha says homemade recipes are in this month. Do you still have my old tote bag? The brand isn't great, but my coworker might want it." She spoke about Samantha constantly. "Samantha says this. Samantha would never do that. Samantha thinks my potential is being wasted." Never once did she say, "Mom, thank you," or "Mom, I miss you." Marcus noticed it too. "Lucia," he said one Sunday evening while handing Miles a plate of lasagna at my dining table, "you're giving her too much space. That girl is drifting." "She's finding herself," I argued weakly. "She's young." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Miles kept his eyes down. We all knew I was lying to myself. Then came the first real blow. Sienna stopped using my last name professionally. It started on LinkedIn, a harmless-looking profile update. Her display name changed from Sienna Anderson to Sienna A. Her explanation? "It looks cleaner, more modern. Anderson is too generic." But a month later, she corrected a colleague who called her Ms. Anderson. "Oh no," she'd said with a bright laugh. "I don't really go by that anymore." That was the first moment I felt something cold creep into my chest. A premonition, maybe. An instinct that whispered, "She is pulling away from you in ways you cannot fix." But the real acceleration happened after she met Adrian, the young executive golden boy from Samantha's corporate empire. Wealthy family, old money, legacy connections. The kind of man who'd move through life with a silk-lined safety net under every decision. 6 months into dating, they got engaged. I should have been thrilled, proud, overjoyed. Instead, I felt an invisible wall rising around her life, brick by brick, shutting me out. Sienna didn't notice, or she did, and pretended not to. She started saying things like, "Adrian's parents have certain expectations. Image is important to them. They have a very refined circle. You know, Mom, appearances matter." Appearances, connections, status, These words twisted through every conversation until I barely recognized my own daughter's voice. One evening, she came over with her engagement ring gleaming under the kitchen light. "Mom," she said casually as she scrolled through her planner, "for the wedding seating arrangement, I'll put you at a table with some extended family friends, closer to the back." I froze. Why am I not sitting with the immediate family? She didn't look up. "Mom, it's not that serious. The front is for people who fit that environment. Adrian's parents are very proper. You'd be more comfortable farther back." Comfortable? Farther back? My own daughter had begun to speak to me like I was a complication, a liability, a misfit in her curated world. And somewhere deep inside, something small and fragile began to crack. She didn't know that crack would one day turn into a chasm neither of us could cross again. The breaking point didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, on a Tuesday night, just 3 days before the wedding. I had just come home from work, kicked off my heels, and reheated leftovers when my phone lit up. Sienna. My heart lifted instantly, foolishly. We hadn't spoken in weeks. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd call to share excitement about the wedding, or ask for advice, or simply include me. I answered quickly, almost breathless. "Hi, sweetheart, how are you? Is everything ready for Saturday?" "Mom," she cut in, her voice sharp and cold. "I need to talk to you about the wedding." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Of course. Do you need help with anything?" A long, unnerving silence. So long I truly thought the call had dropped. Then she said it. "Mom, Samantha is going to walk me down the aisle." I blinked, confused. "What? I don't understand. Why Samantha?" "Because," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "she has been there for me these last few years." Her words hit like a slap. "I have been there for you your entire life, Sienna." "Yes, I know," she snapped, "but this is different." "Different how?" She inhaled sharply, irritated already. "Samantha paid for my master's program. She helped me get my job. She introduced me to Adrian's family. She understands this world, Mom. She knows how to behave at these kinds of events." "And I don't?" I whispered. "I'm trying to avoid drama," she said flatly. "Adrian's family is very elegant, very proper. I don't want any uncomfortable situations." Uncomfortable situations. I, her mother, the woman who raised her alone for 22 years, was now in an uncomfortable situation. My voice shook. "Sienna, I'm your mother. I changed your diapers, stayed up all night when you were sick, worked 3 jobs, so you could go to private school, college." Yes, I know," she interrupted, irritated I had brought up sacrifices she no longer valued. "But that's not the point." "Then what is the point?" "That family has expectations," she said. "Image matters. Samantha fits into that world better than you do." Her words hung in the air like poison. I swallowed hard. "Then why did you invite me at all?" "You can still come," she replied, "as a guest." "A guest," I repeated numbly, "at my own daughter's wedding." "I'll reserve a table for you toward the back," she added, as if offering me something generous, "with extended family friends." I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to steady myself. "Sienna, please reconsider. I'm your mother, the only parent who never left you." "Mom," she said, annoyed, "I've already made my decision. Don't make this harder for me." And she hung up. My fork clattered onto the plate. I didn't know if I'd eaten, if I'd taken a breath. Only one thought burned through the fog. This was not going to be fixed over the phone. The next day after work, I drove straight to Samantha's mansion, the sprawling, immaculate estate that had swallowed my daughter whole. I rang the doorbell. Samantha opened it, wearing her usual perfectly arranged smile that never reached her eyes. "Lucia," she said smoothly, "what a surprise." "I'm here to talk to my daughter," I said, keeping my voice steady, "about the wedding." She hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea. She's very stressed." "Samantha," I said sharply, "please." She sighed delicately and stepped aside. "Fine, come in." The house looked like a photo shoot set. Marble floors, white sofas, curated artwork, a grand staircase that curved like a movie scene backdrop. She called up the stairs. "Sienna, your mother is here." Sienna descended wearing a silk robe, her expression pinched with annoyance. "Mom, what are you doing here? I told you there's nothing to talk about." "There is," I insisted. "Please, just a moment, in private." "No," she said firmly. "Whatever you have to say it here." I opened my mouth, but then Samantha's husband walked in. Tall, polished, perfect. The kind of man who'd never had to work for anything he didn't already own. "Lucia," he said with polite superiority, "to what do we owe this visit?" I forced a tight smile. "I'm here to talk to my daughter about her wedding, about why I'm being excluded." "She's an adult," he replied. "She makes her own decisions." Yes, I said sharply, but I raised her. I shaped her. Mom, Sienna cut in, arms crossed, expression icy. I'm not the little girl who needed you to hold her hand anymore. I'm a professional woman now. I'm entering a world you don't understand. My heart cracked. That world? I echoed. What world is that, Sienna? The world of business, she shot back. Connections, influence, people who can actually help me. And what am I then? My voice trembled. An obstacle? You're not what I need in my life right now, she said bluntly. Something inside me shattered. I whispered, after everything I sacrificed. How can you say that? She rolled her eyes. Mom, don't make this about you. My breath caught. You told me Samantha is giving you away. You put me in the back. And now you're telling me I'm not what you need? Mom, she said, exasperated, stop acting like a victim. This is my day. A mother's place is beside her daughter, I said softly. She stared at me, cold, detached, like I was a stranger. Then she delivered the blow that ended everything. Mom, I legally changed my last name. I'm not Sienna Anderson anymore. I'm Sienna Page Cross. I took Samantha's last name because I was ashamed of carrying yours. The room went silent. My knees nearly buckled. Ashamed, I whispered. Of me? Of what your name represents, she said without hesitation. My heart didn't just break, it collapsed. And she had no idea she had just thrown away far more than a last name. She had thrown away her entire future. I don't remember leaving the mansion. One minute I was standing there, listening to my daughter tell me she was ashamed of carrying my name. The next minute I was in my truck, the engine running, my hands shaking so violently on the steering wheel, I thought the horn might go off. I stared at my own reflection in the windshield, blurred, ghost-like. Was this really happening? Had she really said those words? My chest tightened. A deep, crushing pressure spread beneath my ribs until I could barely pull in air. For the first time in years, I felt like that terrified 28-year-old mother again, abandoned and alone with a 1-year-old child and no idea how to survive. But this was so much worse, because Paul leaving had been a betrayal from a partner, expected, almost predictable. He'd shown the cracks long before the final break. But Sienna, my baby, my miracle, my reason for waking up for 22 years, her betrayal was a different kind of grief, one that didn't scream, but hollowed, quiet, slow, devouring. I drove home on autopilot. The streets blurred, red lights became meaningless. My mind replayed everything. The late nights holding her during fevers, working 3 jobs so she'd never feel poor, saying no to dating because I didn't want to bring more instability into her life, the tiny shoes I saved from her first birthday, the pigtails I fumbled to braid while watching YouTube tutorials. And now, I was an embarrassment. Somewhere between the mansion and my driveway, tears began streaming down my face. Not the dramatic, heaving kind, just quiet, steady drops, like my body had finally given up trying to hold the world together. When I opened the front door, the house felt foreign, too quiet, too neat, like it belonged to someone else. I sat at the dining table, our dining table, the one I bought secondhand but refinished myself, so Sienna would have a place to do homework. My hands trembled as I dialed the one person who would understand, Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. Lucia, are you okay? You don't usually call this late. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Just silence and a broken breath. Lucia, he said sharply, what happened? And I told him, everything. Every sentence, every humiliation, every cold stare. When I got to the part where Sienna said she was ashamed of my name, Marcus didn't respond for several seconds. When he finally did, his voice was low, controlled in a way that scared me. That girl, he said slowly, is lost. I covered my mouth, trying not to sob. Marcus, I failed her. No, he said firmly. You raised her alone. You gave her everything. She is the one who failed you. But she's my daughter, I whispered. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty, he replied. You did your job, Lucia, more than your job. Now she has to live with who she's become. I leaned back in the chair and pressed a hand to my stomach. The nausea had returned, hot and twisting. Marcus cleared his throat. What are you going to do? I didn't know, not yet. But beneath the grief, beneath the shock, something else began to flicker, a faint, exhausted clarity. Maybe the first moment of clarity I'd had in years. I need to think, I murmured. You think all you want, Marcus said. But Lucia, whatever you decide, I'm with you. When I hung up, the silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. I stood and walked slowly down the hall, running my hand along the framed photos on the wall. Sienna at her kindergarten graduation, Sienna in her soccer uniform, Sienna blowing out candles at her 7th birthday. Every picture felt like a lie now, a promise broken. In my bedroom, I sank onto the bed and finally allowed myself to breathe. Not shallow, panicked breaths, but long, painful ones that pulled the grief all the way up from my stomach. My mind kept replaying her words. I was ashamed of carrying yours. That sentence sliced through me again and again, not because of the insult, but because she said it with such ease, such confidence, as if I had failed her somehow. But the more I replayed the conversation, the more something hardened inside me, slowly, like cooling steel. For 22 years, I had been her safety net, her fallback, her constant. And she had taken that constancy for granted, assuming it would always be there. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that her decision to discard my name meant discarding everything tied to it. She had no idea what she had thrown away. And as the night stretched on, as the hurt deepened into something sharp and resolute, I realized I wasn't just grieving, I was changing. Something inside me had shifted, and there was no turning back. By the next morning, the grief had hardened into something colder. Not anger, not spite, just clarity. The kind of clarity you only get when you finally hit the emotional floor so hard that you're done falling. I woke up early, dressed carefully, tied my hair back, and drove straight to my family lawyer's office, Attorney Franklin. He had known me since childhood, had handled my parents' wills, and had always treated me like someone worth protecting. He wasn't expecting me, but when his receptionist said, "Ms. Anderson is here to see you," he came out of his office immediately. "Lucia," he said, adjusting his glasses, "is everything all right?" "No," I said plainly, "but I need your help." Inside his office, I sat across from him and folded my shaking hands in my lap. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. And I did. I told him everything, from Sienna moving in with Paul and Samantha, to the slow shift in her attitude, to the humiliating call about the wedding. And finally, the sentence that gutted me. She said she was ashamed of carrying my last name. Attorney Franklin didn't react right away. He simply removed his glasses and began cleaning them, a habit he had whenever he was thinking something very serious. "Lucia," he said quietly, "are you absolutely certain she said that?" My throat tightened. "I've never been more certain of anything." He sighed heavily. "And what is it you want to do?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I want everything that is legally tied to the name Sienna Anderson removed from her, immediately." He hesitated. "That includes the beach house your father left you." "Yes." "And the life insurance policy you've been paying into for 20 years. "Yes." "And your parents' inheritance, nearly $200,000, designated specifically for the granddaughter who carries the Anderson name?" A deep, painful breath. "Yes." "And who is the new beneficiary?" "Miles." He blinked. "Your nephew?" "Yes," I said quietly. "He's carried our name with pride. He has been more of a son to me than Sienna has been a daughter for years." Attorney Franklin leaned back, studying me. "Lucia, this is a considerable change. We are talking about almost $400,000 in assets. Once these documents are filed, reversing them will be very difficult." "I don't want to reverse them," I said. My voice did not shake. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll proceed." For the next 3 hours, he drafted, explained, and witnessed signatures, page after page, line after line, until my hand cramped and my mind went numb. When it was done, he passed me the final folder. Miles is now the primary beneficiary. Marcus, if he were still alive, would have been proud of this decision. My heart twisted at the mention of my brother. He would want Miles taken care of, I whispered. When I walked out of the office into the bright afternoon sun, I felt something strange. Not relief, not triumph, just a quiet emptiness, like a long hallway in my chest had been cleared out. A hollow that no longer hurt. The months after the wedding passed in a strange blur. I didn't hear from Sienna, and I didn't reach out. For the first time in 20 years, I let myself stop worrying about her. And in that space, in that quiet, my life shifted gently towards something softer. I met Carlo during one of my night accounting classes, a divorced man with 2 grown children, sharp-minded and warm-eyed, someone who understood the value of effort and the comfort of stability. He didn't care about fancy cars. He didn't care about the size of my house. He didn't care that I still drove my old truck or that I made my own coffee instead of buying $9 lattes. He liked me exactly as I was. He said it often, and he meant it. For the first time since Sienna was born, I felt seen. Carlo and Miles got along instantly. On Sundays, he would cook lunch, and the 3 of us would sit together like a real family. Not the polished, expensive kind Samantha curated, but the kind built on warmth, effort, and quiet loyalty. As years passed, this new rhythm knitted itself into something whole. Miles graduated. He got a job in industrial engineering. He began saving for his own apartment. And every week, without fail, he called me, asked about my day, my work, my health. "Thank you for being like a second mother to me," he would say. And every time, something inside me healed a little more. But while our lives steadied, Samantha and Paul's world began to crumble. It started with whispers on social media, restaurants closing, staff being laid off, investors backing out. Then Miles called one night, sounding unsettled. "Aunt Lucia," he said, "I think they're in trouble. Sienna posted that they're selling one of their cars." A week later, "The restaurants, they're going under." Another week, "Paul mortgaged the big house. The bank is foreclosing." And suddenly, the mansion that had become Sienna's symbol of superiority, the pool she chose over her mother, the life she used to replace me, was gone. Just like that. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. If anything, I felt a quiet melancholy. Tragedy, even when deserved, is still tragedy. But there was poetry in it. Life has a way of balancing scales without our help. Then one Friday night, 5 years after the wedding, long after I'd stopped expecting anything, my phone rang. The screen lit with a name I hadn't seen in years. Sienna. My heart didn't leap this time. It didn't break. It simply paused. I let it ring twice. Then I answered, "Hello, Sienna." Her voice came through cracked, trembling. "Mom, it's me. I need to talk to you." And I knew, before she even said another word, that the life she'd chosen had finally fallen apart. When I heard Sienna's voice, thin, cracking, unfamiliar in its desperation, I didn't feel the rush of maternal instinct I once might have. No surge of protectiveness, no frantic need to fix everything for her. Just a stillness, a quiet, steady stillness I had earned the hard way. "Mom," she whispered, "please don't hang up." "I wasn't planning to," I replied. My tone was calm, almost neutral. There was breathing on the other end, jagged, shaky, the sound of someone whose world had collapsed. "Mom, we lost the house." The house, her palace, her symbol of superiority, the place she chose instead of me. I closed my eyes. "I am sorry to hear that." She swallowed hard, the sound loud in the silence between us. "Samuel, he lost everything. The restaurants failed. His investors pulled out. The bank took the house. We're in a tiny apartment now. Adrian's gone all the time trying to find work." "And you?" I asked quietly. "I'm working night shifts at a call center," she said, her voice cracking with humiliation. "We can barely cover rent. I can't believe this is my life, Mom." There was a long pause, a silence heavy with everything she wasn't saying. Finally, "Mom, I need your help." My chest tightened, not out of sympathy, but out of old memory. The echo of 100 nights I'd stayed awake praying she'd never have to face struggles like this. All the sacrifices I'd made to shield her, all the years I gave alone. But she hadn't wanted my world. She had chosen a different one and shut the door in my face on the way out. "What kind of help?" I asked. Financial help." There it was, the word she'd never used before, the word she believed Samantha and Paul would provide forever. "A loan," she added quickly, "just until we get back on our feet. I'll pay you back, I swear." A deep ache bloomed in my chest, not for her suffering, but for the fact that our relationship had come down to this. "Sienna," I said softly, "I don't have that kind of money to lend you." Her breath hitched. "Mom, please, I know you have savings. I know you've always been careful. I'm your daughter, please." "My daughter," I repeated quietly. The word didn't roll off my tongue easily anymore. Because daughters don't treat their mothers like stepping stones. Daughters don't discard the people who raised them. Daughters don't erase their mothers' names from their lives out of shame. She went quiet, sensing the shift. "Mom," she whispered, "I know things didn't end well. I know I hurt you, but please, can you give me a chance to fix things?" Fix things. Memory stabbed through me. Her saying she didn't need me. Her telling me, "Samantha, fit in better." Her placing me at the back of her wedding. Her taking Samantha's last name. Her saying she was ashamed of carrying mine. "You said you were ashamed of my name," I said. "Do you remember that?" Silence, then a tiny, trembling yes. "You said Samantha represented the life you wanted, that I didn't." "Mom, I was stupid," she choked out. "I was young. I didn't know what I was saying." "You knew enough to file legal paperwork." I could hear her breath catch, like the words hit her physically. Then she whispered, raw, desperate, stripped of pride, Mom, I don't have anyone else. The truth landed like a stone in my gut, not because it pulled at my sympathy, but because it was finally, painfully honest. Samantha wasn't answering her calls. Paul wasn't reaching out. Adrian's family had likely stepped back the moment the money vanished. And here she was, remembering the mother she once dismissed as unimportant. Sienna, I said gently, I would have never abandoned you, but you abandoned me. A soft sob broke through the phone. Mom, please, let me come home. Let me fix everything. I'll change my last name back. I'll do anything. I closed my eyes. Years of my life flashed through my mind. The nights I held her feverish body, the shifts I worked until my legs shook, the birthdays I stayed up all night baking cakes because I couldn't afford store-bought ones, the graduation where she didn't ask for a photo with me, the wedding where she didn't want me in the front row or walking her down the aisle. I thought of the documents I'd signed, of the inheritance that had quietly passed her by, of the beach house she never knew she'd lost, of the life insurance she no longer had claim to. Finally, I spoke. Sienna, you didn't just turn your back on me. You turned your back on our entire family, on the name our parents and grandparents carried with pride. She sobbed harder now, panic cracking through. Mom, please, I'm begging you, tell me how to fix it. But some things can't be rewound. Some decisions carve scars too deep. And some lessons, the ones that reshape a person, come only when life collapses around them. Sienna, I said softly, I hope you find a way forward. Truly. But you will have to do it without my help. Not because I want to punish you, but because you chose a life where I had no place. Mom! I wish you well, I whispered, and for the first time in years, I meant it. But I can't be the person you call only when everything else falls apart. And I hung up. The silence afterward wasn't peaceful. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't vindictive. It was heavy, trembling, real. A mother grieving a daughter who was still alive, but no longer hers. After I hung up, I stayed seated for a long time, hands still curled around the phone, breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. The house felt strangely quiet. Not empty, like it once did when Sienna first left, but settled. Like a storm had finally passed, leaving behind sharp, clean air. I expected guilt to wash over me. I expected shame, regret, the instinctive pull to fix everything. The same instinct that had kept me alive through 22 years of single motherhood. But instead, something inside me finally aligned. For the first time since Sienna was born, I felt whole, solid, unshakable. Because I had told the truth, and the truth had set something free in me I didn't know was still trapped. Later that night, Miles came over for dinner with Carlo and me. We sat at the table eating pasta, laughing at something he said, when my phone buzzed again. Sienna, calling, again. Miles's eyes softened as he saw the name. Aunt Lucia. Do you want to answer? I looked at the screen for a long moment. Then I flipped the phone face down on the table. No, I said simply. Miles nodded, not in judgment, but in understanding. Carlo reached over and squeezed my hand. After dinner, as we rinsed plates at the sink, Miles cleared his throat hesitantly. Did she say anything? He asked softly. I exhaled. She asked for money. He winced. I'm sorry, Aunt Lucia. It's not your fault, I said gently. People reveal their true selves when life gets hard. He hesitated before speaking again. Can I ask you something? Why do you think she turned out like that? I leaned against the counter, staring down at the water, swirling in the sink. Sienna grew up surrounded by pressure, expectations, comparisons. She thought material things defined worth. I tried so hard to give her a stable life, but maybe somewhere along the way, she confused struggle with shame. Miles nodded slowly. Then he said something that shifted the air in the room. You know, she always bragged about how rich her life was. But you're the strongest person I know. You built everything from scratch, without privilege, without help. If anything, she should be proud to come from your name. It struck me deeply. This young man, who owed me nothing, understanding me better than the daughter I raised. Thank you, Miles, I whispered. He set down the dish towel and took my hands. Aunt Lucia, I know you don't like to talk about it, but all those things you've done for me, being at my graduations, helping me with college applications, Sunday dinners, I want you to know something. He looked directly into my eyes. You didn't lose a daughter. He squeezed my hands. You gained a son. My throat tightened as tears blurred my vision. Not the sharp, grieving tears that came after Sienna's betrayal, but warm, quiet ones that soothed rather than burned. A few days later, I went to Attorney Franklin's office to pick up finalized documents. Everything, the inheritance, the life insurance policy, the beach house, was now legally in Miles's name. As I reviewed the last page, Franklin looked at me over his glasses. "Lucia, do you feel at peace with your decision?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. "For the first time, truly, yes." "You know," he said gently, "your daughter may try to contest the documents." "She can try," I replied with quiet certainty, "but she won't win, and more importantly, it won't change anything." "Because of the name clause," Franklin added. I nodded. "Yes, the inheritance was legally tied to the Anderson name. She removed herself from it, not me." He closed the folder with a soft click. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons at the exact moment they need to be learned. I breathed out slowly. "Yes, it does." That evening, I sat alone on the back porch of my house, my modest, hard-earned home, and watched the sun bleed orange and pink across the sky. For years, I had viewed this place as a symbol of what I couldn't give Sienna, but now, for the first time, I saw it differently. Not lacking, not embarrassing, not small. Just mine. A life built with scraped knees, double shifts, burnt dinners, and a stubborn heart that refused to stop loving, even when it hurt. Sienna couldn't see that value. But I could, finally. In that quiet golden hour, something settled in me. I had spent 22 years proving my worth to someone who would never appreciate it. But now, I no longer needed her validation. I no longer chased her approval. I no longer carried the weight of her rejection. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a gentle, powerful truth blooming in my chest. I am enough. I have always been enough, and losing her did not diminish me. It freed me. It didn't happen all at once. Life rarely delivers consequences in a single dramatic moment. Instead, they arrive in layers, thin, sharp slices of reality that slowly cut through every illusion a person has built. For Sienna, the unraveling came piece by piece. About 2 weeks after her tearful phone call, I received my first unexpected visitor, Miles. He knocked on my door just after sunset, his expression troubled but not surprised. When I opened the door, he lifted a small envelope. "She went to see me," he said softly. I blinked. "Sienna?" He nodded and stepped inside. She showed up at my apartment. No warning, no call. She just stood there in the hallway, crying. I sat down slowly. "What did she want?" He exhaled. "Everything." I tilted my head. "Meaning?" He pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printout. Her birth certificate, updated. "She changed her last name back," Miles said quietly. "Legally. 2 days ago." My breath hitched, not in shock, but in an old, dull ache that no longer controlled me. "So she thinks that's how this works," I murmured. "As if undoing the paperwork undoes the choices?" Miles sat across from me at the dining table. "Aunt Lucia, she really believed you'd hand everything back," he said softly. "She asked me to talk to you, to convince you." "And what did you say?" Miles swallowed, then spoke with a steadiness far beyond his years. "I told her she didn't lose anything recently. She lost it 5 years ago, the day she chose money over her mother." I closed my eyes, moved by his loyalty. He continued, voice low. "She kept saying she made a mistake, that she didn't know what she was doing, that she was young." "And what did you tell her to that?" Miles's jaw tightened. "I told her youth isn't an excuse for cruelty." His words hit deeper than he knew. A few days later, the second wave of fallout arrived. This time through a phone call from Samantha. I recognized her voice instantly, polished and cold even when fraying. "Lucia," she said, her tone clipped. "We need to talk." "I don't think we do," I replied calmly. She exhaled sharply. "Sienna is struggling. She and Adrian are barely surviving. It would be helpful if you could offer assistance." "Helpful to whom?" I asked. "To Sienna or to you?" Silence. Then she said the quiet thing loudly. "She is your daughter." I almost laughed. Almost. "She was also your stepdaughter for years," I reminded her. "And that didn't stop you from encouraging her to replace me." "Don't be dramatic, Lucia," she snapped. "It wasn't like that." It was exactly like that. Her composure cracked, for the first time in all the years I'd known her. "You don't understand how hard this has been on us," she said. "We've lost everything." "Everything?" I repeated. "You lost money, prestige, a lifestyle. But you still have your family, you still have your network, you still have options." After a long, tense pause, she said, "You're really not going to help, are you?" No anger rose in me, no satisfaction, just a steady truth. "I'm done being the fallback for people who never valued me." She hung up without saying goodbye. Word spread quietly, the way gossip always does in families. But instead of pitying Sienna, people began remembering things. things they'd excused, things they'd ignored. Neighbors recalled how she'd spoken down to me. Old friends remembered how she avoided introducing me to people. Coworkers whispered about the way she bragged about her real family, the wealthy one. Slowly, carefully, the world she had once polished so carefully cracked and showed its rot. Meanwhile, mine flourished. Carlo and I got engaged that spring. Miles bought his first home using part of the inheritance, an airy apartment with big windows and a quiet balcony where he planted basil and tomatoes. He invited me to bless the place before he moved in. I walked through each room with him, watching his eyes glow with pride, and felt something warm bloom in my chest. This was what legacy looked like. Not money, not status, not polished facades, but gratitude, kindness, loyalty. Then came the moment I never expected. 6 months later, Miles married the woman he'd been dating since college, a gentle girl with bright eyes and a laugh that filled a room. The ceremony was small, beautiful, intimate. Before the music began, Miles approached me with the softest smile. "Aunt Lucia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you walk her down the aisle?" My breath caught. "Me," I whispered. "You," he said. "You're the closest thing I've ever had to a mother, and I want everyone here to know it." Tears stung my eyes. During the procession, as I held the bride's bouquet and guided her toward the altar where Miles stood waiting, I realized something monumental. I wasn't losing anything. I had already gained everything that mattered. Laughter, family, peace. A future built on love that was freely given, not demanded, not conditioned, not purchased. At the reception, Miles hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for showing me what a real parent is." I closed my eyes and let the truth settle into my bones. I hadn't been replaced. I had been rediscovered by the person who deserved my love all along. Somewhere across the city, in a tiny apartment she once would have judged harshly, Sienna was likely scrolling through photos of this very wedding. She wasn't in them, not because I excluded her, because her own choices had drawn the boundary years earlier, and now the consequences had finally caught up. Years later, I sometimes find myself sitting on the same back porch where I once cried over the daughter I thought I had lost. But the tears that come now are different, softer, warmer, the kind that come not from grief, but from understanding. This spring, Miles and his wife invited me over for dinner. They looked unusually nervous, exchanging small smiles, until finally his wife blurted out, "Lucia, we're expecting." For a moment, the world seemed to still, not in shock, but in the quiet, awe-filled way life sometimes pauses to show you that everything has come full circle. Miles lifted a hand to his face, wiping at emotions he rarely let show. "We wanted you to be the first to know," he said. "And when he's born, he'll carry the Anderson name, with pride." The Anderson name, my parents' name, my grandparents' name, a name Sienna had discarded to chase a version of herself built on money and appearance, yet it lived on through someone who had chosen love over entitlement. As they hugged me, something clicked into place within my heart. I hadn't failed as a mother. I hadn't failed as a woman. I hadn't failed at all. I had loved fully. I had given freely. I had stood back up after being broken. The lesson came slowly, quietly, like dawn creeping over the horizon. Family is not determined by blood alone. Family is shaped by loyalty, respect, and reciprocity. Sienna once believed she was ascending into a better world, one where the glitter of status outshone the gentle work of love. But love is not a luxury. It is a discipline, a choice made day by day, and she chose against it. The consequences that came later were not punishments from me, but simply the echo of her own decisions. Life holds its own scales, and eventually it balances them. As I watched Miles and his wife hold hands, whispering about baby names and nursery colors, a warmth spread through me deeper than anything I felt before. I am not defined by who left me, nor by who rejected me. I am defined by the love I gave, and by the love that returned to me, even if it came from a different direction than I expected. In losing the daughter who never valued my sacrifices, I gained the son who honored them. And through him, a new branch of our family will grow, one rooted not in shame, but in pride. A cleaner, quieter ending than the dramatic one Sienna once demanded, and far more powerful. My story isn't about revenge or punishment or victory. It's about release, clarity, healing, and the truth every viewer needs to hear. Sometimes, the life you deserve begins the moment you let go of the person who kept breaking your heart.